Hi, it's really good to be here. My name is Jonathan Schulteis. I work with the Cultural Management Program here at North Carolina State in the Department of Horticultural Science. And one of the main areas I work with is sweet potatoes. So I wanted to tell you a little bit. One of the things that we do in this particular project is we try to find ways to grow our vegetables better, to hopefully make a difference where growers can then go ahead and have more economic gain from what we do. So that's one of the main things we try to do, and it can be a number of different things. With sweet potatoes, more recently, we've been doing quite a bit of work in the last 2 years with potassium and looking at rates as well as looking at the different kind of carriers. One of the things that really changed why, or kind of spearheaded why we wanted to go ahead and look at potassium is the pricing has just dramatically increased and fluctuated tremendously over the last 3 years. In 2021, it was about $200 for a ton of potassium fertilizer. This spiked to 2022 to cost $1,200 for a ton of fertilizer. So that's a huge increase, 600%. It has come back down, and it's now $350 or so for a ton of fertilizer presently. And so if we can find a way to better manage a crop, particularly in this case sweet potatoes, then that might be a way for a grower to realize some cost savings to best manage that particular part of their program. So what we've done is we've kind of come up with an experiment. This has been done with Brandon Parker, and we kind of came up with this idea. We wanted to go ahead and see with the treatments we use how the different amounts of fertilizer or rates might influence what happens as far as the amount of sizing and yield over time. And so we have here in the front, we have the highest rate we used of 225 units of potassium per acre. In front of me, we have 150 units. Behind me a little bit, 75 units, so it's getting to be less. And then no units, or nothing was applied as far as potassium is concerned. In the soil that we grew these in, it had a low potassium index of about 35. So typically what NCDA would recommend is 150 units of potassium per acre for that particular season or growing season. So we wanted to see also how these developed over time, as early as 75 days to my right, your left, 85 days after planting, 95, and then 105, 115, and 125 days after planting. And so we only see to my right or your left the smaller canners, and they really aren't going to be at a point where a grower is going to make any real money. And this year things were probably delayed a little bit because of lack of some moisture up front, more in August, until we started getting some moisture a little later in the season. So anyway, we're trying to see where is the happy spot where we can grow these and realize a good yield and realize sizing, which we've seen to have a pretty big impact, the potassium on the sweet potato crop. And so we were looking at those treatments over time, the rates over time, and I want to go ahead and hand this off to Brandon to give you the key results of this study.
It's good to be with you here today. Again, my name is Brandon Parker. I'm following up here with Johnson's talk and kind of describing the setup of the trial we've got. Again, we're looking at this study as a rate basing on 225, 150, 75, and 0 or no potash per acre rates. And also looking at a duration in time going from 75 to 125. And that's days after planting. We harvested these on roughly every 10 days. We are initially seeing some trends. It's very early on. We haven't completely run and looked at the data, but have looked at some averages. It is, noted this is kind of what the recommendation will be, around 150 pounds per acre or units of potassium. We are seeing early on at the 75 and 85, we were seeing some increased in number of potatoes in the 150 and the 225 rates over the 0 and 75. Not obviously sizing in number ones, but also just in volume of number of potatoes present at harvest. And in this study, we were harvesting 10 hills in 6 locations in each treatment. So 60 hills of potatoes out of a 225, a 150, a 75, and a 0 each harvest. But so to compare them a little more, I guess now, we were seeing early on at the 75 and 85 a really low number of potatoes and small potatoes, most of them in decanters with the 0 and 75, which is what we would expect. And then as we transitioned here to the 95 and especially on from the 105, 115, and 125, we are seeing, we've seen kind of a little less separation than what we had expected in sizing, with the 0 and 75 catching up to in size, but the numbers are still a little lower than our 150 and 225 on average. These lugs are lugs that we selected when we averaged all 6 plots that we dug. We averaged those 6 together and found the most representative 10 plants, so to speak, out of the 60 that were harvested. So these lugs are an average of each plot. We didn't have an area to display all of them. But this is just something that we are, based off of the last 2 years, we've done some potassium trials and have noticed some trends towards earlier sizing of roots. And not only, in this study, it seems like we're maybe seeing more in numbers as far as greater number of potatoes, and the sizing is not is not separating quite as much in this trial as we had hoped to see. But in past years, we have seen where we get larger number ones and larger jumbos with higher rates of potassium. And we are interested in looking at this some more, trying to see if, like Jonathan mentioned, we can help the industry by saving some money on potassium fertilizer with the increased cost, because a lot of growers are using this rate, the 225, some even more. We do have a few that are down around 150, 175 per acre, but for the most part, a lot of the industry is using a higher rate. And I do think we can show some evidence that 150 is sufficient, even on low potassium soils, and the importance of soil samples that growers take, because everybody's taking soil samples, but actually using those potassium levels that you have to indicate how much fertilizer you need. You can see as we step across to 115 days after planting, I think this one shows it a little better with our number ones in the 150 and 225 rate being greater in number and in size than the 0 and 75 pound treatments. Our 125 days after is, the numbers of potatoes is not showing up quite as good here, but that again is why we do replicated studies and had 6 replicated areas out there that we selected from. But again, you are seeing a greater number of jumbos, which is a trend we have seen in the past as well, with the 150 and the 225, with 4 to 5 jumbos in each treatment versus the 0 and 75 only have 1 or 2. This is again, initial study, a first year looking at this, something we drew up and designed, and are hoping to learn more about this and kind of fine tune possibly for next year.